gone on maternity leave.
So everything's been
They're worried about recruiting on
running
staff.
the whole five interventions. Okay, so we will have
Yeah.
J was the judge. Judges of
Oh, hello.
For some reason, didn't come up for service at the community hall. Everybody texted at 2:30 in the morning, including your, maybe now you should try. Oh, no way.
How you doing, Gil?
Well, if it is, then it is. Yeah. Okay, sounds fair.
Hi everyone. Everybody's waiting to get in.
Where? Are you not on the radio? It sure does. Hour and a half.
I heard Wednesday.
Oh, no, he always does it on Tuesdays. His show is always Tuesdays.
Oh, no.
And say what?
But then I had to go to work.
Oh, yeah. I listened to the radio station at the doctor's office and people kept calling me. Did you actually see that? Did you? No. Never had the phone, but I feel like.
Suddenly went quiet.
Suddenly does, doesn't it?
Where's
Oh no, Alan's away, that's right.
Al's
he's
cruising.
He's cruising.
As
On
is
the
his
Alan
wont.
cruise, what?
As is his wont.
Yeah. Fair enough, right? Exactly. What, just one of the many reasons why it's not mine.
Are you interested in chocolate?
In what? The 2 clocks. We wait for that one. So they're the same.
No, that's what it actually
Impeccable timing, Mr. D. All right, it is 4:30, and I'm going to call our council meeting to order for 4:30 p.m. on Tuesday, November 26th, and recognize that we're conducting our business today in the territory of the Clayoquot people. I will have a few things just to say first, because we have a very full audience, and that's great. It's really wonderful to see everybody here. Just a couple ways, for those of you who are new to coming to a council meeting, we ask that you watch us but not talk. So please no whispering or talking amongst each other. Please keep it quiet, because that helps us concentrate on the matters at hand and on each other and the discussion that we need to have. You're welcome to come and go as you like to, and if you do leave in the hallway, we just ask that you take conversations all the way outside, because we can hear things in the hallway too, and it's distracting. If you have a cell phone on, now's a great time to pull it out and just put it on vibrate. That would be very much appreciated. Okay, so first order of business today is the agenda, and I do have one amendment that I am going to propose now, and so I will move that we postpone item 8.1, which is the wastewater treatment plant report, to the December 2nd Committee of the Whole. And thank you, seconded by Councillor Chalmers. Any questions about that? Because our CAO is away today and we didn't anticipate that. We're going to postpone until he's back to be able to present the report. Any questions? No? Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Councillor McMaster?
I'd like to move that the correspondence from Natalia Un regarding taxpayer fatigue and the voting rights of non-resident voters be added to the agenda as a late addition after item 7.3, and that the November 26, 2019 regular agenda be adopted as amended.
We'll skip the last part. We'll just do the amendment first. Okay, is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Any comment? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carried. All right. So then we have 2 amendments. So now a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
I'll move that.
Thank you. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Steer. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Okay, so then we have public comment on agenda items, and because we did have the item added, we can hear the submissions from members who signed up. So we have 5 people who have signed up, and each have up to 2 minutes to speak. We do have a timer that runs on the clock, and it's not a chance for questions and answers. It is a chance for you to present your views to us, and we will listen. So I will call first, please, on Jack Gillie. And so this is addressing the letter, essentially, from Natalia regarding transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and it's Jack Gillie, 926 Treefrog Lane. There is a lot of concern about this transit bylaw in the community. There is objection to people not subject to the bylaw being considered as electors for the purpose of the alternate approval process. I've inquired at the regional district. There was no clear answer as to whether this was legal or not, but I feel it is certainly unfair that people not subject to the bylaw are allowed to be part of the approval process, or required. Their number, that inflates the numbers. Anyway, there is objection to Tofino taxpayers paying significantly more than our neighbors because of the assessment system. This is a system that several, if not many of you on council have already called, and as recently as today, called it unfair. So I'm wondering why there's support for that. Tofino is a seat on the regional board, so its voice is heard and its interests are protected. will you as council, in particular as regional district rep, move to stop this bylaw if the electors of Tofino oppose this bylaw at more than 10% of the Tofino electorate? Thank you.
Thank you. Shelley Renard.
Do I have to stand there?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
I forgot my notes, but thank you, Monday Night Movies. I'm using this. I'm Shelley Renard. I live at 1104 Abraham Drive. I have lived here for 41 years, and interestingly enough, I'm sitting right next to Gillie, who sold me my first property. I also want to acknowledge that council has inherited some of these issues. I want to refer to a radio program about 4 days, maybe 5 days ago, where the two mayors were on. Josie, you made a comment about our community needs to be socially and morally responsible for every member of this community. I think in theory we all agree on that. This is about the transit bus, the project. But what I'd like to do about the social and moral issue is I'd like to turn that around and put it in your laps. Because I voted for you. We voted for you. I voted for you, Josie. And so what I want you to look at is I want you to look at the long-term residents. I want you to look at our renters. I want you to look at the tax burden that this transit bus, this project, is going to put on us. For me personally, it's going to be between $200 and $210 per year, plus my 53% increase. This is crazy. I do not want to be, we do not want to be a Mary Buick, as you mentioned, and leave this town. So basically, I'm fighting to stay here. And I'm appealing to you as a council to think about that morally and socially. What do we do to alleviate these problems, especially the transit bus? I know that we can put it on hold. I know we can. We can wait for a better time, but we don't need this. We need your clout. We need you to go to the ACRD and say, no, this isn't the right time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Arlene McGinnis.
Hi, I wasn't expecting to speak here tonight, but here I am. So I would like to say that my main concern about this transit system is that we do not have enough information on it. There are other things in our community that are much more important than a transit system. We desperately need low-cost housing. We need a new hospital. The foundation is cracked in ours, and it's going to fall if there's an earthquake, probably. A new library is wanted, the sewer and water system. All of these things, plus our sidewalks, are in disrepair. A lot of them are needing fixing. There's so many things that we as taxpayers have got to put our monies towards. I don't think bringing in a transit system at this time is a good idea, especially when we are not informed about it. And we don't know anything about it, really. I don't know who to go to get the correct answers on the system, how it's going to work, how long it's going to be, how many buses, who's paying for it. Is it fair? It doesn't seem to me it is. It seems to me that us taxpayers in Tofino and Clayoquot will be the ones paying for it. That's not fair. And I do want to stay in this community. And also, there's one thing that I do. When I rent out a unit, I do not increase the taxes on that unit in spite of the fact that I can put them up 2% every year or whatever it is. I don't do it. I tell them when they rent, you look after this apartment, I will not raise your taxes. And I have been very, very fortunate in renting out my places.
Thank you very
I-
much, Arlene. I'm sorry, we've reached the 2 minutes, and I just need to be fair to
I'm
everybody.
sorry. I'm babbling on. Sorry.
No, not at all.
I just feel that we really do have to consider other issues first.
Thanks, Arlene.
Thank you. Sorry.
Cathy Thicke.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The reason that I'm here today is to speak to you about two issues that I'm concerned about. Just to put it out there right at the very beginning, I'm not opposed, as I'm sure 95% of people in this room are not opposed to the bus and the transit system idea. That is not the reason I believe that most people are here today. The reason that we're here is because we're concerned, at least I'm concerned about two things. Number one is that how this decision was made. We elected you just recently, and you've heard from several people here that we voted for you. And we expect that you are going to go to bat for us. And we expect that when an important decision is made at that higher regional level, that the will of council is considered before that decision is made. I know it's not absolutely mandatory, but it is very important, as Arlene just discussed, under the current circumstances, with all the other things that we have to consider. So I am really concerned that this council was not given opportunity to say yes or no in voting at the regional level for this AAP process and the consequential bus service that we were about to engage in. I'm also concerned about the funding formula based on the mill rate. I want to know why that decision was made and why was it not considered to have a parcel tax or some other way of funding this. Because right now it is clear from what we've seen in the paper that what Tofino's would be paying would be almost twice what someone in Yuku would. So I think we're concerned about that disproportionate. And I think the reason that we're here, and maybe it's a surprise to you, but the next opportunity that we have for public comment is December the 3rd. And we've all seen the flyers and we've been invited, but wow, that's 3 days after the vote. So, to me that doesn't really, it's not an opportunity for us to really engage with you. So I just think that you need to
We've
discuss
reached the
those
2
things
minutes.
before Friday.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.
Great. And last but not least, Carol Gagné.
I'll just read a letter. Since I'm not a public speaker. Dear Mayor and Council, my name is Carol Gagné and I live at 1389 Pacific Rim Highway. I would like to address Council regarding my opposition, not to the transit proposal itself, but to the funding proposal. Based on my current assessment, my taxes will be going up by $325 just for the bus, which is a 5.6% increase above what I paid in taxes this year. I believe that the district is taxing Tofino property owners out of our existence, forcing us to sell or move away, or forcing us to turn our properties into vacation rentals if we haven't already, thereby taking away full-time rentals. We long-term residents can't keep supporting every project and proposal that council wants, especially in light of the costs of the ones that have to be done, like the wastewater treatment project. The tax increases have become ludicrous and out of control. I hereby request that council pass a motion directing Mayor Osborne to request that the regional district put a pause on the transit issue now, that they relook at the proposal itself in its entirety and review the funding of it. As an example, with the bus expected to transport workers to their jobs, I think we should be able to petition to use RMI funding for it, since most of the workers work in the tourism industry, and the tourists themselves might use it to travel between the communities. Additionally, I find it hard to believe that bus fares will take in over $160,000 per year, so then we will have to pay even more to cover the costs. The survey results were positive for the idea of a bus, but not for the high taxes to pay for it. The funding for this, as well as for other projects I might add, definitely need reviewing. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, thank you, everybody. Are you trying to get in, Peter? Okay, all right. Just didn't know if you were working tonight or... Okay, so we are now going to move on to the mayor's report. And I do have one thing to report to you, council, which is to let you know that I've been appointed to a joint provincial and local government committee that's going to provide recommendations to the province around short-term rentals. So they've struck a committee to look at the impacts of short-term rentals, both positive and negative, on communities, as well as looking at some best practices around regulation, and then looking also at split class assessment ideas and other forms of other taxation models for short-term rentals. And so I'm really pleased to accept that appointment, and it begins in December. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we move on to our delegations, and we do have a delegation from McKenzie Beach Resort. So now it's your turn, Ryan. Are you presenting on behalf of the group? Great. Okay, so thank you. And you have up to 10 minutes. And then after that, we have the opportunity to be able to ask questions, and that doesn't have to be limited to 10 minutes. So we'll sit patiently and listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Osborne, councillors, local personalities. We've done very similar to this presentation about a year ago, prior to going through our environmental studies with David Clough, who's very well known to the city, and prior to doing a bit more in-depth planning around what we'd like to do. So we just thought, with a new council in place, we would like to set forth what we're aiming to do. Ideally, this was intended to be dovetailed with our first reading, but understand that that's been pushed down to middle of December, where we've got other commitments that won't let us present. So this is just intended to give you, from our own voice, what our intentions are, and give you an opportunity to ask questions about what it is that we're really going to do. So by way of brief background for anybody who doesn't know, we took over the resort in May 2017, and I think most people in the room know what kind of state it was in, across every facet of it, and the kinds of feedback that the community was getting, Tourism Tofino was getting, the Chamber of Commerce was getting. So what we've basically done is tried to start fixing utilities, electrical systems, our perception, our guest experience, and a lot of the guest experiences come very right, and a lot of that's to do with Ross McKenzie, our GM's attitude and work ethic. So for anybody who hasn't met him, this is Ross in the hat over here. And one thing that did happen when we were going through the acquisition was that we figured out McKenzie Beach Resort's actually not zoned to be a campground or RV park, despite the fact that it's probably one of the longest serving in the community. And prior to making the acquisition, Mayor Osborne met with yourself and I believe it was Dana Hawkins and Ricardo at the time, just to make sure that this wasn't us barking up the wrong tree, and that in a couple years the camping uses would be taken away. And you graciously gave us a lot of info and put us in touch with the right environmental groups to be figuring out what we wanted to do from there. So the rezoning that we're looking at is not to build a massive hotel. It's not to build anything other than allowing us to keep our camping going and being zoned in compliance. So it would be a comprehensive rezone. We'd have a new comprehensive zoning, and it would be resorts, camping, and a couple secondary uses, which would include Little Ron's Barbecue, general store, swell paddle, and I'm trying to think of Alex's company name. I don't know his company name, but it's a printing and retail shop. Guys, I don't know how to use this.
Just admit, yep.
Yeah? Okay, I could have done that. It'd be a lot easier. The slide that you see in front of you on the top is what McKenzie Beach Resort looks like today. You can see in the, what would that be, northwest corner, there's some beachfront camping, which is and has been for a long time an eyesore. It's basically sardines on the beach, and it's not something that we're proud of or we want to keep around. When we took over, there were over 30 sites there. We've reduced that sequentially each year to just under 20 at the moment, and the intention is to get away from that completely. But it's also a pretty significant source of income. So we can't do that without replacing it somewhere else. And what we've come up with in consultation with Aaron's team, Aaron, Peter, etc., is looking to shift our current C5A1 boundary, which is that line you can see just next to the RV sites in the top one, to the OCP boundary, which makes sense for a number of reasons. So it's about a 115 meter shift to the east, and it would allow us to move all that camping off into the forest. And that's where David Clough comes in. So we spent probably about 8 months going through the various iterations, including walking that forest extensively with him and staking what a path and what camping paths might look like and what kind of impact it might have on that area, because it is a riparian area. And David's been fantastic to work with on it. We've staked out those sites. There will be no impact on existing trees. There will be no impact on the existing creek or fish habitat. And the construction methods, the EMP that we put together, involves very little, if any, petroleum-based tools. And it's going to be site selected with David on site to make sure that it complies and to make sure that it doesn't impact what's pretty special back there. The other side that we'd like to look at here is getting back to the community and making McKenzie Beach a bit more accessible other than just Hellison. So if you look at that green strip in the bottom map, sorry guys, I'm just going to point. There? Oh, there you go. If you look at that green strip along there, this is all district property through a right-of-way. So what we've contemplated is putting together a public access path all the way to McKenzie Beach. We would give up or register an easement or right-of-way to be figured out with your staff. That would be the city's property that we would obviously help maintain. And we would have put in place a number of parking spots, public parking spots, just off of McKenzie Beach Road. So that's the rough idea. I'm not going to go through this, but put simply, there's a couple facets of the plan that are important to us. One is giving public access to the beach. 2 is giving public parking to the beach. And 3 is getting ourselves in compliance with your zoning regulations in a fashion that doesn't materially impact us financially, detrimentally at least. So we wanted to give you a bit of a summary of the actual numbers. When we acquired the resort, there were 107 total units. That includes a number of illegal seasonal overflow units. This was literally people putting their cars, putting their tents on any bare spot of land on McKenzie Beach Resort. And I suspect it was a bit of a cash business. But we shut that down the day we got involved, and we actually ended up shutting down a number of campsites. And that was primarily to make the guest experience better, which is, as it stands, working pretty well. What we'd like to do with that shift of the OCP and the zoning line and that expanded area is take it back to a number that starts to make a bit more sense for us, which is 87 units from the 75 that we've taken it down to. And as you can see there, the beachfront camping is reduced to almost nothing, 10 units, and our intention is to have that be somewhere below 5, if not 0, depending on the economics. And the intention is to make a boardwalk that forks through the forest, where we can put camping pads or glamping pads, whatever you want to call it, and have it be a what you bring is what you take camping experience. This is just a letter, if you can read sideways, going back a long time ago, with the city acknowledging that the zoning was not appropriate and that there was a communal will to be fixing it. So what we're actually asking for is not an increase in density, an increase in units, it's a reduction in all of those. This was the original plan. This is a blow-up of how we would start addressing parking and public access. But as we started thinking about this, Mayor Osborne, you actually had a chat with us about the potential bus loop, and it resonated because that's not the nicest road to walk down today. Hopefully it is next year, but where we went with that is we redesigned this to add about 22 public parking spots from what was about 10 before, and add a loop so that you could actually fit a standard bus through our parking lot. The other side of that is that our new lobby building, which sits about there, has more than sufficient bathrooms to deal with our own uses and to deal with public use. So there's coin-operated showers, there's bathrooms, and as part of our proposal, we'd like to suggest that we would open that up. Obviously, we maintain it anyway, so it's not a big change for us. But it could make that beach a lot more accessible for people visiting Tofino. I think you guys know what McKenzie Beach looked like and has looked like for quite some time. These are really nice pictures. It was actually much worse when we took over. This is why we bought the resort. I mean, Tofino anywhere in the world is unique, but in the west coast of Canada especially. So this is an experience that we want to start promoting with a lot more vigor and differentiate ourselves a little bit from some of the other hospitality providers in Tofino. So this is the vision, for those of you that haven't seen it, of where we want to get McKenzie Beach to at some point. And you'll notice up there that Drifter is where we'd like to head to with the branding. I'm running out of time, so I better do this quickly. This is just a site map to show you guys exactly what we would like the site to look like.
If you have a couple more minutes that you'd like to present, I can ask council if they're willing to extend that delegation.
If you wouldn't mind a couple minutes or so.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you.
Thanks, I'll talk about quicker. This is just a sample of where we're heading to with the actual site layout. So all of those red pads you can see there are going to be built, with your permission, off of a communal boardwalk. And what we'd like to do is take kind of a Tom's model to it and say that for every sales, every rental, camping rental that goes in there, we would figure out a %, and that goes straight back into conservation. And I don't know if that's specifically going to be McKenzie Creek restoration or conservation, or if that's something we could do as a broader context within Tofino. But we think, and David Clough seems to agree, that that would be a nice advent to it. This is just a bit of imagery to give you a sense of what we'd like to get to. So, nothing unique for Tofino. You guys have kind of patented boardwalks over the years. But just an experience. I mean, if you look at these pictures here, this is what it looks like behind our existing RV sites. It's stunning and untouched. So we'd like to keep that and give people the ability to see it, because there's not many places in Tofino where you can stay in the middle of a wetland. As far as the actual design, very simple helical piles for anybody that's interested. Non-invasive. We're not sinking anything in the creek areas that has the potential to pollute them or to contaminate them. And I'll leave you with this, but we've been at it about 2.5 years now. We've done a lot to make the experience of our guests a lot better, and I think we're doing a really good job. I'll give Ross a lot of kudos for that, but we're not quite where we want to be, and we're also not going to be doing it in a day or in a year. This will be an evolution that we'd like to do with you. And you know, the temporary use permit that you granted us for the staff RVs last year has been going very well. We've got our own staff there. We've got staff all over town that stay there, are respectful, have a nice little community. So it's something that we'd like to push a bit more into after this is done and dusted. Thanks for the extension.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ryan. Any questions from members of council?
Just more a comment.
Please.
You know, thank you for the presentation and the work you've done with Mr. Clough. Obviously shows the integrity of what you're doing, and I get the gist of what you're trying to do and your collaborative approach, and it's appreciated. And thank you for the presentation.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you. And I guess we'll be considering first reading at our next meeting, potentially. I'm looking at Aaron.
I think it was December 12th or so. Aaron, did
Yeah,
you?
Pete's, I think, working on it now, and
Okay.
I think it's on first on his list.
Pete's giving a thumbs up there,
I think it'll
so.
probably be right now.
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay. What, you're not staying for the rest of the meeting?
Thank you.
Enjoy. All right, so we'll move into the correspondence section of the agenda. And first we have correspondence from the ABICC regarding the call for nominations for executive committee and the resolutions process for the 2020 AGM and convention. So there is a deadline for the resolutions, and my suggestion would be that I'll ask our staff to put this on our agenda for maybe for the December 10th meeting, and we can have an initial conversation and then looking towards the first meeting in January to actually finalize anything we wish to take forward. Does that sound okay? Sure. Yeah? Okay. Elise?
That's great. I just wanted to note that council didn't adopt the minutes from the previous meeting.
Sorry.
Skip.
You skipped
So
past
at the end
it.
of the correspondence section or at some point during the
We'll just do it right after this.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. All right, so any questions on the ABICC process? Okay, get that in your calendars. All right, so we'll just go back up to item 3.1. Thank you, Elise. And I will ask for a motion that the minutes of the regular council meeting held November 12th be adopted.
Move adoption.
Thank you, moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? All in favor? Thank you, motion carried. Sorry about that. Okay, and then next is the correspondence from the Local Government Leadership Academy regarding the 2020 forum that takes place in Richmond. I think some of you were able to attend the LGLA session last time, but some of you were not, and I highly recommend it. I'm looking particularly at Councillor Long and Councillor McQuaid.
I was at LGLA, I was
at
ABICC.
Oh, that's the one you missed. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. But also, it's a great training opportunity anyways for refreshers and for new items. So, Councillor McMaster, are you interested?
No, I'll just be coming back from Florida now. So.
Oh, well, there you go.
It's got a particularly great topic this year, too. Inclusive leadership.
Nice. Okay. So, looking at a probable?
I'm going to pass on.
Okay.
I won't be able to attend.
Okay, all right.
I'd like to go.
All
Yeah. I'd like
right,
to go.
so I would suggest then a motion to approve up to 4 members of council.
Would council?
Oh, hang on, let's say 5, because we don't know about Councillor Anderson, so up to 5 members of council to attend the LGLA Academy and to be reimbursed in accordance with the bylaw, whose number I never remember.
Great.
Thank you, expense reimbursement bylaw.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Sorry, Nyla, it's
Okay.
clumsy. Any questions about that?
I was just, it was similar to the format that was at Parksville last year, or slightly. I know
Slightly
the focus
different.
is more leadership and.
Yeah, so the focus at the first year, there's a lot of kind of mechanics of being on council,
Right.
and then this one gets into a little more governance. So yeah, for councillor law,
Yeah.
you'll miss a few things, but you'll get a few other things that, yeah, you'll enjoy it.
Stoked.
All right, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Thank you. None opposed. Motion carried. Okay, the next item is correspondence from the City of Victoria to UBCM regarding support for resolutions. Do you wish to do anything with this? Don't have to. Councilor Chalmers, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I just got a little behind myself.
It's okay.
If anybody else is interested, I wouldn't mind supporting them in that. I think it was a good topic. I know it's something that Councilor McQuaid and
I'm wondering what exactly they are looking for.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I found it a bit convoluted.
So what happened is, because we ran out of time to debate resolutions at UBCM,
It
these
goes
were not
before.
considered. And it goes to the UBCM executive. And so the City of Victoria is asking, they're saying to the UBCM executive, we want you to move forward on these. And I think that the more local governments that say, yes, we agree, the more powerful the statement is. So they are looking for support. And you don't have to make a decision today. If this is something you want to think about, we could bring it back.
I just feel like this is actually, for me, where we would be making resolutions in January, that
Right.
perhaps Health and Human Services resolutions be considered first or something to this extent. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I do support this, but
Mhm.
I don't think that the UBCM executive wouldn't.
Right.
But
That's a really interesting point about the ordering of resolutions.
yeah,
and wording.
I'd be more interested in making a resolution that would support resolutions of this type coming up first at UBCM, then picking and choosing resolutions post fact to support on an executive board piece by piece.
The resolution reform process you're starting to initiate. Yeah. I mean, we've all talked about it.
Is this
I've-
just like,
I've talked about it,
what are you
yeah.
talking about?
With my children.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes,
We'll talk about
like on a case-by-case basis, this is something I supported and waited for
Yeah.
it to come up at UBCM, but I think, like,
Okay,
I'll move to support it,
okay, so you're moving to send a letter
of support.
of support to UBCM on the resolutions B171 and 172.
Yes, please.
I will second that.
All right, moved and seconded.
Sarah?
Does anyone have any questions about that? Councillor Law? you
I
read the
gotta
letter,
tell you, I did
understand it?
read through this, and I didn't get a chance to discuss it with anybody in the know.
Okay.
So I thought there was probably more to it that I didn't understand.
Right.
And so I really couldn't make it at this time educated
Okay.
decision.
Having read, yeah, I understand, it is a heavy duty topic too, and there's a lot to it,
I mean, it
so.
seemed reasonable, but I don't,
Mhm.
I think actually Andrea.
Councillor McQuaid?
McQuaid, sorry.
It's okay, don't worry.
Morning.
It's fine, it
Right.
eliminates that problem.
Councillor McQuaid has a point.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point. So.
and we can do that above and beyond. I think that's something worthy of discussing in December.
I would like to.
Okay, any other comments on this?
No, I can support it.
Okay, thank you
She worked really
as well. All right, I'll call the question then. All in favor of sending the letter of support? Any opposed? Motion carried, none. Thank you. And then last was the late item that we added, so that is the letter from Natalia Un to Mayor and Council regarding transit and taxpayer fatigue.
Okay, well, I actually changed it to taxpayer fatigue and voting rights. So, I've talked to this council before about needs and wants, and I think this lady says it a different way in must have and nice to have, and I really think this town is reaching the breaking point for increasing taxes, and I think transit is a nice to have. I don't think it's a must have. I mean, yes, I think everybody'd like it, but timing is not now. I mean, there's lots of things I want in my personal life, but you just have to push it off till you can afford it. So that's my main point there. I think we have to think about taxpayer fatigue, or else people will be forced to go to do more vacation rentals, maybe even turn their homes into student dormitories. And the last point is, I'm not sure about the voting rights for non-residents, and this pertains to later on when we've got that as well, as it comes to district to Tofino elections as well.
Are you asking a question?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Okay. I haven't looked at the bylaw and the service area in depth, so I'm not really prepared to speak to who's allowed to vote in this ACRD election, but I can speak to District of Tofino elections and assent votes a little more later on in the agenda, or if you'd like me to address it now, I can.
No, I'm happy for District of Tofino later on, because I have some points there. But I do think, whatever it is, non-residents pay a lot of taxes, and I think they should have a voice. I also realise when it comes to by-elections, you're only allowed to vote in one by-election. You can't vote in Tofino and Richmond or whatever, so we can discuss that later on.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, yes, Councillor Chalmers.
I just want to add to sort of, I opposed it being on this because we are coming up with a budget meeting, and I was really looking forward to talking to people, and I think there's going to be good turnout, and this is going to be addressed in it. And I think I'd like to add that it's not just a want. I mean, a lot of us ran on parking issues, on climate issues, on social issues, and all these things are addressed by a bus system. So I think it's more than just a want, and I think there's a bigger picture here than just the taxpayers, which I understand that the fatigue, and I'm a taxpayer and it's a hard thing, but I think we have to look at the whole picture too. I just want to state that. Thank you.
I'd like to say a little bit more about the need, the want versus need. I'm for a transit system. I think it's actually a great way to cover a lot of bases that Tofino is tackling, such as parking, vehicle traffic, transportation essentially. And I'd like to say too that as somebody who's worked with elderly people in town, there's not a lot of amenities for elderly people, and transportation is lacking. And I personally nursed people on Chestermere Beach in their own homes who could not leave. And they were alive and fed at the mercy of their friends who would come visit them. And I was one of those people who would bring food. And I just want to say that's a very big deal. And so I understand that the tax burden goes up. I think it will be mitigated, in my opinion, with other funding if it does get through. And I just want to say that to me is a big deal. There are people that actually need some form of public transportation in town.
Thank you. Well, we will know shortly after November 29th what the results of the alternate approval process are, and then what happens next will depend a lot on the outcome of that, so to be continued. Okay, thank you everybody. All right, we're going to move on in the agenda then, and we will discuss the building bylaw amendment next. Mr. Rogers.
And then there were none.
Pretty sure I'm not the reason. Building bylaw.
Don't take it
so
personally.
saying. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I have a brief report that presents the information that's in the report in front of you about a building bylaw amendment 125601. This building bylaw amendment sort of represents our first shot at amending these bylaws on a little bit more on a better schedule. So bylaws sometimes we get behind the times. With the building bylaw, we think we have the capacity now within house to update this on a yearly basis, rather than waiting for 5 years and having to do a bunch of housekeeping amendments. So while this amendment was meant for the step code changes, it also includes some other amendments. And again, that's something I would like to get to as well, in our zoning bylaw and a couple of other bylaws, but that's just sort of the overall view of that. So 3 things we're talking about this evening: step code, fee reduction, and a step code rebate. The step code adoption is mandated by district policy. We adopted a policy in June that would slowly bring the district into compliance with the requirements of the province in the BC Building Act by 2022. In 2020, the policy that we adopt would bring Tofino up to step 1 level of the step code. Basically, that means that buildings can meet the current requirements as they are required to in BC code, but you have to measure. It's a no-fail test. If the building doesn't pass, it doesn't matter, but it's the process of testing a building, getting our local builders familiar with the process, educating them on the process, helping them understand cost, price, and process. We're also suggesting we introduce a labeling component of this. So the labeling would go into houses saying you've met this standard. We provide some education for the builders about how they do, potentially develop some kind of friendly competition, and also allow a future owner to know what the houses have. The fee reduction has a separate portion of this. We noticed a little bit of an inconsistency in our fees. What we're proposing to do is when we first receive an application, we receive a processing fee for our staff to work on it. If that building permit doesn't go forward for whatever reason, or in the case of a moving permit or a demolition permit, we need to just recover those fees. What we're suggesting is that we would reduce that fee for building permits that move forward. So we require $20 for the fee when it's applied for. When the building permit's issued, we would deduct that from the overall cost so that people aren't getting double charged in a sense. It's a small fee reduction, but it's a reduction nonetheless. We've increased the costs of the moving and demolishing permits to more accurately reflect the amount of staff time we're spending on these. We don't see a lot of moving demolition permits. Probably, I don't know if I've ever seen a moving permit. I've probably only seen a handful over 10 years of demolition permits. I don't think that's a big change. It's just more about consistency. And finally, with the step code rebate, so the step code, step one of step code is going to require energy modeling for houses, and we're going to require a blower door test at the end of the project. We're proposing that builders also conduct a mid-construction blower door test to allow us to understand what's happening in the building before the drywall and the paint and everything goes on. So there's an opportunity for the builders to fix things before we get to the part where we have to start ripping apart walls. That's an extra cost, so because of that cost, we're suggesting this $500 rebate for anybody who's willing to do the mid-blower construction door test. We would like to use the surplus funds that we're projecting for 2019, about $25,000, which would allow us up to roughly 50 rebates, which we think would take over, we'd be able to use up over the next 1 to 2 years, depending on how fast things are building out. And just sort of to tie it all together, we've been doing a fair amount of consultation with our building community to let them know about these changes. We have regular emails coming out of the Office of the Building Inspector. We've had quite a few in-person and on-site meetings. We've had an open house. We've had 2 builder workshops specifically about step code, the last one being a couple of weeks ago, I believe, which I believe we had very good attendance. And then we're working on a website update for people who aren't in the local building community and for people who are using builders from away, so at least they have a resource to go to understand our changes. That's it.
Thank you.
Any questions, you can jump right to Nicholas Henderson. He's looking forward to speaking to council.
Yeah. Councillor McMaster?
You lost me a little bit on the blower door test. Is that, are you mandating that?
Nicholas, you're going to address that?
Yeah, sure. So the BC Energy Step Code does mandate a final construction blower door test, which measures the amount of air leakage that a new home will undergo. So that single blower door test at the end of the construction process will be mandatory by BC Building Code. The mid-construction blower door test is a similar test, but it's put on usually just after insulation and the installation of the air barrier. The reason it's such an important item is because at mid-construction, when the air barrier is just newly installed, and you put your test on, you get a very accurate reading about how much air, warm, heated air is leaving the building, at a point when you can actually fix it. Once the drywall is on, it's very difficult to go back and address a major air leak. And a bunch of little small air leaks will add up to a major air leak. So what we would like to do is make it irresistible to do that mid-construction test, because a $500 rebate on the cost of an average building permit for home is actually quite substantial. So what we're hoping is that people will jump on it, they will conduct that mid-construction test. They'll only get the rebate if they kind of commit to doing the mid-construction test.
Well, the mid-construction test isn't mandated.
Mid-construction test is not a part of the
Okay, that's why I was getting lost, because I thought you mandated it. Why don't you just lower the price and we get the rebate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, the final test is mandated by code. The mid-construction is going to be highly encouraged.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Steer? Oh, sorry, Councillor McLeod.
Okay, is the purpose of mid-construction is to ensure, a better question, is the end blower test pass-fail?
When you get to step 2 and above, it will determine a pass or a fail. It's kind of how the Energy Step Code works. Is there's 3 main areas that builders have to hit. They have to hit an overall reduction in energy consumption, which is usually achieved by an increased amount of insulation. They have to achieve a target for mechanical energy intensity, and the third one is air tightness. Air tightness is kind of the most important thing, because it's almost what you have more control over it. You have a lot of control over air tightness during the middle part of the building when you're actually installing that air barrier. It's very difficult to change your air tightness at the end. So, for instance, step 2, 3, 4, and 5, you might have a target for air tightness and a target for your insulation value. You put all the insulation on at the end of the project. If you don't meet those metrics, then it's considered a fail, and it's fairly hard to address. Step 1 is called the no-fail step, because there is no There's no consequence for not meeting those metrics. It's purely a learning phase. It's learning how to build the buildings better without any kind of consequence. Did I answer your question?
You did, and my follow-up ones, so that's great. Councillor Steer.
I'd love to have a discussion around the benefits of air exchange rather than air tightness, but that's for another, maybe after hours.
Sure.
I do want to discuss about the surplus that's being generated, and maybe having a discussion around how we might allocate that. And don't get me wrong, I think it's a great idea to offer the rebate, but more on the larger level of what we might be thinking about with that surplus, and if there are areas that we might be able to look at, for example, and I do understand about what we've been using the money for historically, but now with the surplus and things that I would like to have a discussion around. I know it's in here is things like building permit fees and the $9 per thousand, and if there are ways that we can start looking at, and I understand for the long-term planning, but are there ways of looking at a reduction if it's appropriate, and having a larger discussion on how we may deal with that surplus moving forward. And I think the rebate's a good idea, but if there are areas that we can start reducing, because I give you an example, I'm sure you all know that the cost of a building permit on my house, for example, it was close to $3,000, and it's a very simple house. It's a significant portion. If there are ways that we can start looking at, as we've been hearing quite a bit of the burden and the costs of things, if that might be an area with that surplus that we could have that larger discussion before we make.
Can I get a planner answer first, and then defer to Director?
I was looking at that. It was into
the idea for us as part of the overall idea of reviewing our fees would get to a point where we don't have such a large surplus. It's a difficult thing in building as it is in recreation, because things just happen sometimes. We make our best guesses. I think that we're showing over year a consistent surplus, and so Nicholas and I have had some early discussions about potentially generating a report for the new year about what would it look like if we reduced, the per thousand, to $8 per thousand, or whatever. We've talked a little bit about that, and then sort of developing an option that we would then discuss with the finance department, and then bring that forth to budgeting. So it's we're thinking about it, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and talk about it at length, although we touch on it once in a while. That's all I'm saying.
I think that's a good approach with building. With this service area, we have to be very careful that we just don't look on an annual basis or back only 3 years or 3 to 5 years. We actually have to look over a longer range, because the landscape changes quite a bit over a 10-year period. So if we see a significant deficit 10 years ago and we're seeing some surpluses now, perhaps on average that evens out over time. And so with certain service areas, we have to look at it that way. This is one of them. I'm reluctant to decrease it to where we would have broken even for 2018 or 2019. I think that we need to be conservative with how much we reduce fees, if we reduce fees, and I will be quite involved in that discussion and also development of new fees if we decide to go that route. But certainly we're looking at it.
Yeah, and then just a slight follow-up on it. So, for example, is not fully understand. So within that ability to look at those fee reductions, there is the flexibility, for example, on residential building permit fees as opposed to commercial, where we do, there are more costs associated with those larger projects, and where, I guess where I'm coming from is where if we can have the flexibility to look at things like residential building units, where we can have the flexibility, say in those permit areas, we could look at a reduction in fees. Is that a possibility when we look at those fee reductions in the long-term sort of planning out? Mine's coming from obviously a different lens than maybe the economics of it, but do we have those flexibilities within those fee reductions when we look at those and how we would calculate?
I think I'd need a better understanding of how the fees are generated right now before I can answer that question completely. If it is a possibility to segment the fees and break them down, certainly we'd have a look at that and see whether that's achievable or appropriate. Yeah.
I think we moved a lot of the cost for commercial development or part 3 construction to the developer's side with the requirements that we send them to their own consultants. And so a lot of that work that was within the district is now being charged out to the people who are receiving the benefit. So just the idea that we are looking at that kind of idea, but we're just doing it in different ways. The other thing is there's a cost of doing the service. So you as a person who's building your house, or myself who's building a house, or whomever, that fee, that's based on the work that's happening for you. That's not a community benefit. Unless that we have a community where we feel that, you know, the building inspector's wages or the cost of this service is better borne by the wider tax base than the individual owner. And that's a bit of also a philosophical question. In Tofino, we see a lot of houses get built by owner builders or people owning lots. Would this be the same discussion if we had someone come in and do a 24-lot subdivision and build the 24 houses? Would we want a fee reduction at that point? Again, maybe we would. Maybe that would make the houses $500 cheaper. Maybe it wouldn't. So it's just, those are the kind of other questions I'd want to bring up in our discussions. Just to be
and those are the same ones I would want.
Yeah.
That's one.
Clearly, we try to estimate the fees as best as possible. We're not in the business of overcharging. And in the case where we do have a surplus, I really like the way that this has been directed into something that makes for healthier buildings and lowers greenhouse gas emissions, and is, you know, working towards the step code stuff and incentivizing people to do that. And so I wonder, you know, in that situation where we do have a surplus, you're talking about, is there a way to do rebates, or is there, you know, a way to offset it for the people who have already incurred the cost, or the overcost we could call it, but maybe there is a way to use that again to incentivize modifications that are post-construction that make for healthier buildings and really build towards a district goal in our strategic plan around climate issues. And so accepting that there's going to be a little bit of overage from time to time, and Nyla's point about stable, consistent, predictable, all of those things, but when there is that, we actually redirect it right back into the buildings themselves, including those that have, you know, just been paid a little bit too much. So I like this proposal. Really, I think it's smart. Councillor Law, did you have a question? Did you see your hand?
Oh, it was just, actually, I think it's been answered. But I did have another question. Was about once the excess here is gone, you know, once the $25,000 is paid out in rebates, what happens then?
It's our intent that the program would end at that point. So we believe that the market will have adjusted to the increased cost by then. There may be a conversation with council about whether we want to mandate a mid-blower test through our bylaw, I think, which we have the ability to do. But at least this next year or two should give us time to give us more information about that, a little bit more about data. It seems like a really, I'm not sure why it isn't mandated, but it seems like a really sensible approach. The idea of, and I think if they fail, it's a notice entitled that we generally deal with.
Yeah, past step two and above, a fail of your mid-construction, your final, or any metric, a fail on your final blower test would likely result in a notice untitled that just explains that the building has failed its energy compliance. I don't know that there's not much else you can do, because it may not be reasonable to make people tear apart their walls to install more insulation or improve their air barrier at that point. So really the notice untitled is kind of the best compliance tool we have for that. I wouldn't mind pointing out also that there are some incentive programs that we could look at, and as time permits, I'd like to look at them and maybe bring them to council at a future date. Something that would incentivize building to a higher step or a better energy efficiency standard. Some of them in municipalities across BC are actually quite aggressive, it's not the word robust. You know, I believe the city of Kimberley was offering up to an 80% reduction in building permit fees for people who achieve a very high target for energy efficiency. And a lot of those incentives can be funded from a couple of different grants. Again, I haven't had time to research all of them, but I'd like to, if it's something that I'm directed to do, I'd be happy to do the research and to look into it. On the other hand, this would be a reduction for people who are probably willing to spend a little bit more money in the first place. So if you're looking at affordability, that might not be the answer, but it's something that we can still explore.
But if we're looking at long-term affordability versus upfront capital investment into something that costs less to operate and is better for the planet in the end, I think we're on the right path.
I attended a climate leadership institute group last 2 weeks ago, and one of the directions that I believe City of Richmond was taking was they were allowing people, they were requiring 3, but allowing them to go to 2 if they produced energy on site, basically. So, because again, less about energy efficiency, but greenhouse gas reduction. So they allow a certain step down if you could provide whatever it is, solar or geothermal or air source.
Yes, there's a raging conversation around the net zero ready versus the greenhouse gas emission reduction. And they're not both, like the step code doesn't take care of greenhouse gas reductions in the same way. And so I think we could see the province stepping forward in the next year or two and tweaking and making some changes to actually bring that in line. So it's interesting stuff. Wow, did we just geek out on that? Or it's great having you here. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions about this report? No? Okay. Can we turn our minds to the motion?
I'll make a motion that the District of Tofino Building Bylaw Amendment number 1256.01/2019 attached as Appendix 1 to the staff report titled Building Bylaw Amendment Energy Step Code be introduced and read at first, second, and third time.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any final questions about the report? Or okay, all in favor? Thank you. None opposed? Motion carried.
And I'll move that up to 25,000 of the 2019 surplus in the building inspection service area be reserved for the step code rebate program.
Moved and seconded. Any final questions? Comment? Nope. All in favor? Thank you. None opposed? Motion carried. Okay. By-election results and procedures. Thank you for the report, Elise.
You are welcome. I did some very fast Googling just now about the AAP process. If we want to talk about that at the end of the report.
Yes, at the end would be great.
Okay. This report has 2 components, as the title suggests, the 2019 by-election results and proposed amendments to the Tofino election procedures bylaw. The 2019 by-election results were that Dan Law was declared elected. Spoiler. With 318 valid votes. Just gonna flip my own notes. Moving on to voter turnout. Voter turnout is the percentage of estimated eligible voters who cast a ballot in an election. The District of Tofino calculates our estimated eligible voters based on the provincial voters list, which is also listed on Civic Info. That's what's up there. And then we'll revisit these numbers a little later on in the presentation, but we also have a different number for the number of registered voters. But the turnout is based on that 1,422 number, so 42% of estimated eligible voters cast a ballot. And in comparison to other years, these are compared to general local elections. So generally you'd see a higher turnout in a general local election versus a by-election, but I would say that 42% is very healthy for a community of our size and for a by-election. It is a bit less than the last year's general election, but it's in the range of other general local elections that we've had on the coast. The ballot accounts. So ballot accounts are just official forms that are used for ballots received for use at a voting opportunity, and every election official, not elected official, so all the people working at the election have their own ballot account, and then I, as the chief election officer, compile those into one ballot account, and that's what you're seeing here in front of you. So this lists a number of different metrics, and it's really to keep us on track to make sure that all the ballots received for use that day are accounted for. What we're looking for is the top numbers to equal the bottom numbers in both advanced, general, and then the totality of ballots. So ballots received for use were those that I actually unwrapped from a package that I received. So on advanced voting day, I gave myself 200 ballots. General, I gave myself 499 because the ballot packages were slightly off. Issued to electors, we had 607 ballots accepted, 604. So that means the next two rows are important here. Ballots rejected, 1. So I rejected 1 ballot, and I'll explain that in just a second. 2 ballots were spoiled and replaced, and that means that someone came to us after they had filled out their ballot and said, I made a mistake. Can I have a replacement? So then we just take the ballot back and replace it. Total ballots issued to electors were 607, but then, as you can see, those 3 are removed to total 604 votes. There were 92 total unused ballots in the process, and 0 ballots were unaccounted for. So to explain, I wonder if I do, no, I don't have a slide. To explain that rejected ballot, what happened there is, in determining the official election results, I noted a discrepancy in the number of ballots run through the machine, 604, versus the total of all of these numbers together is 600, or it was one higher. It was 605. And I couldn't understand why that was. And it was quite a vexing problem. So we held a recount, myself and 2 election officials, manually counted all of the general election day ballots, and we invited candidates to witness, but no one attended. And I found 1 ballot that had been voted twice. Someone voted for 2 candidates on 1 ballot, and the machine accepted it. And that was an error on our part for not testing for that possibility. We do several tests before election day. We go through several test ballots in different formats and varieties, and for whatever reason it didn't show up in our tests, and I did get in contact with our ballot and memory card coder to note that this was a significant issue that could have been a much more significant issue if other people, I mean, we would have found it in a manual count, but certainly it's not ideal that that was missed in their testing as well as ours, so something for us to note for the next election. Any questions on this part of the presentation? We'll move on to the second part of the report, and that's staff is recommending some changes to the way that we register electors, and then I'm requesting a bit of direction on whether council would like to see additional voting opportunities. So, like I said, staff is recommending a change to the way District of Tofino registers voters, and there are 3 options for local governments. Option 1 is voting day registration only. Option 2 is to maintain your own list of registered electors and non-resident property electors and provide for advanced registration. Or you can use the provincial voters list and then also maintain your own register of non-resident property electors. District of Tofino uses option 2, and we are in the minority of local governments who use this option. Only 11% of municipalities maintain their own register of electors. The issue that I'm trying to address in recommending a different way of doing it is what I noted on a few slides previous to this, is that we have Elections BC calculates our estimated number of eligible voters at 1,422, but our voters list has 1,835 people registered to vote in Tofino. Now, it's not a grave issue, but it does take time to maintain that list. It is sort of user maintained in that you have to declare to come into the office and take yourself off the list if you die or if you move. People don't generally do that because they don't know that they have to. It's not well known that you would have to register both with your municipality as well as the province as well as the federal government. So there's an education piece there that's, we can work harder to educate voters about that. But this also comes up a little bit in that when one uses a register of electors, you don't have to show ID when you come to the poll. So if you're on our list, we ask you for no ID, you can vote. Having these extra folks on here who are likely not eligible to vote anymore, either they have moved away or are deceased, creates a bit of an issue for accountability. So that's generally the problem that we're trying to solve by suggesting that we amend the District of Tofino Election Procedures Bylaw to allow same-day registration only in order to overcome that accuracy issue and staff time associated with maintenance of our own voters list. So what that would mean for voters is that they come in and every single person shows ID. And we don't maintain the list after the fact. It's sort of the same as if you were voting in a provincial or federal election. You show ID and then you vote. There would be no pre-set list where we would be looking for your name. The process takes about the same amount of time because we're not looking for anyone's name. We're just writing it down as they come in. And no permanent register of electors would be maintained, and there would be no advanced registration. There's no need for that. So I think that's sort of the end of that component of my report. I'll pause for questions here, or we can deal with them all at the end. Council wishes.
I'll maybe just raise the question that was raised last time we discussed this, which is one of the impacts would then be, in an election, you could not get a list of registered voters from the District of Tofino for campaigning purposes.
That's true. That's true. I did not mention that. So of the people that ran in this by-election, I think we had 6 candidates and 2 didn't request one, but most did. But most also had to ask me, what do I do with this? So it wasn't that clear how well it was being used, although it is up to you as elected officials. You would maybe know better how you used it and if it was very important to you.
Councilor Moore?
If you didn't have a list of registered voters that somebody could review, how would you protect against, in a sense, voter fraud, where somebody could come in and say, I've lived here for 30 days, I want to vote, and then go to another town and say, I've lived here for 30 days and vote, if there's no record of that person or no way to check? How do you protect against that? Just hypothetically.
Yeah, it's a good question because most of what we do on election day is believing people. We ask for someone to make a declaration, and there are stiff penalties for making a declaration that's false. But so what happens right now is someone comes in to vote and they say, I live here, but none of my ID shows that I've lived here for over 30 days, but I don't have anything. And you don't need someone to vouch for you in the municipal system. You just declare that you do live in that municipality and you make a declaration as such, and then I sign it and witness it. So the same would happen. The same thing can happen in any of these ways of registering people. There isn't a real difference in that aspect. You are not allowed to vote in more than one place. You only have one area of residence. Although you may own properties in multiple jurisdictions, you only have one residence. So it does get tricky for people, but it is sort of a personal decision sometimes about where you intend to return, and that would be your residence. Except for students, they can vote in 2 different places. It's interesting. I don't know if that really helps you much. It's just not that very different. It's not very different in either of the systems, I guess is what I would say.
I was just thinking for accountability, like if it's written down and it's saved somewhere on a piece of paper.
Right.
I'm not really arguing for it. I saw the voters list and it was
Yeah.
a lot of people that I know that are deceased and moved away, and it was actually quite confusing. It was not very helpful in some ways, but.
So the way that it would work in this system where you register on the same day is that list that's compiled at the end is available for inspection and can be challenged. People can be challenged.
Oh, I see. I thought you said it was gone.
Yeah, it's just not compiled in advance. It's only
Oh, I
that
see.
we would take your name the day of and write it down and have you take an oath that you, or make a declaration that you are entitled to vote on that day. But it's not that we do away with all documentation.
Okay, sorry. I thought that was that list
Yeah,
would
sorry,
be
that
gone.
was not clear then. We take people's ID, they still have to make a statement about their eligibility to vote, and we would write down their name and have them sign
Great.
that declaration as well. So the other third option that we're not talking about here is the provincial voters list, which may solve the issue if someone wanted a voters list. We can just adopt that same voters list and then apply to the province. They give us a copy, they compile it for us, and we use that, is the other option. And then we still have to maintain our own register of electors who are non-resident property electors. So you still maintain a very small list at that point.
Is there any benefit of maintaining our own list that obviously you're not espousing for it, so
The
I'm just...
benefit can be to voters in that they don't have to have ID. People seem to like that. Although it's not normal in other voting processes, so a lot of people show up and even if they're on the list, they give ID. As Mayor Osborne said, there's an advantage to candidates in having a compiled list, although the accuracy of that list is being called into question by this conversation. So there's not a lot of benefits. It's an older way of doing things, and then we got new options throughout time, and we just haven't adopted a different option.
So if we wish to pursue that, the provincial voters list, we would amend the bylaw to use the provincial voters list.
Correct.
And it really adds no extra work, I mean, very, very little extra work administratively for our staff, but still provides candidates with the opportunity to get a voters list should they wish to use it.
That's right.
Personally, that's my preferred option.
I think that sounds great.
Okay. Do you want us to do the motion making now? And then
Nope,
we can
I'm
do
just
the-
going to make a note to myself.
Okay. Because you have more.
Well, further to that, I just
Yeah.
make a point that I found the voter list helpful in a sense that I realized that there was a lot of people I didn't know, but also that it wasn't accurate. So it did have value.
Okay. The second part of this discussion is more of maybe a council discussion as staff is requesting direction. Whether you wish to amend the procedures bylaw to include other voting opportunities that we don't have right now. This is a discussion that started at the same time when we brought this forward to the previous council. One of the questions that came up was, well, how many opportunities do people have? What about mail-in voting? Why don't we do that? And we get that question quite often at voting opportunities. So communities under 5,000 are required to have one advanced opportunity in addition to the general voting day, and everyone has to do that 10 days before the general voting day. That's the minimum requirement. Communities over 5,000 people have to have 2 advanced voting opportunities, and they can set the date of that second one on their own. Optional voting opportunities include mail ballot, special voting opportunities, as well as additional advanced voting opportunities. So special voting opportunities are those, you might think of these as going to a hospital and setting up a mobile voting opportunity, so something that's outside of the normal voting place and normal voting times. So they can be in community centers or, yeah, they're just sort of a little bit different to reach a specific targeted crowd, I guess.
Like helicopters to lighthouses for...
Do they do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they sure do.
Goodness. So the process of allowing additional voting opportunities would also be to amend the election procedures bylaw. So we do this all by bylaw.
Okay.
2 of the options that I've identified here have certain reasons behind them generally, or sort of, the rationale that some communities use them are laid out on these next slides. So by mail ballot, I mean that you can mail in a ballot to me, and we open a window for that, and I don't know the exact timelines, it might be up to our discretion. Persons permitted to vote by mail ballot are those with a physical disability, illness, or injury that affects their ability to vote at a voting place, and persons who expect to be absent from the municipality on general voting day or at the times of advanced voting opportunities. Generally, they increase the opportunities for non-resident property electors or electors whose mobility or health is compromised. So when you think of areas that have seasonal populations, cover a large area, thinking about the ACRD as an example, mail-in ballot is a good choice for those types of jurisdictions. Costs, there's postage, and then a few other supplies and additional staff time to this option. Added advanced voting days. Generally, this is just to increase voter turnout overall. However, it's most likely to affect residents, as non-residents aren't always in the jurisdiction. It is a common option to add an additional advanced voting date. Half of the communities that were surveyed So there's about 73 communities that responded to a survey from Civic Info. Half of those do provide an additional advanced voting opportunity, and the other half stick with the one, and we are just in that other half that stick with the one advanced voting opportunity. The increased costs with an advanced voting day, or an additional advanced voting day, is limited to staff time, but I would note that that's one of our largest costs due to the long hours and multiple people that it takes to run a voting place. So there are a few options in front of council. I can say that option 1 has already changed, but directing us to amend the election procedures bylaw to allow for the provincial voters list to be used. And then there's this question in front of you about if you would like to see other voting opportunities available to voters.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers.
For the mail-in ballot, do you have a concept, like vague ballpark of like the additional cost? Like, is it significant? I was really surprised at how much an election costs to begin with, so I actually have no concept of what the staff time and then mailing.
I would say that it is, I think of postage, and I think of actually how many non-resident property electors we have, or that.
I'm thinking also a lot of the elections happen in the winter. We do have a very holiday-oriented community, and I do know a lot of people that did want to vote in either last couple elections that were away, had trips planned and all that, so just the accessibility. So if it's not a huge significant, it definitely, I think, would increase voter turnout.
Yeah.
Something to discuss.
Can I ask, for a mail-in ballot, you mail the ballot to them?
Yes.
And then they fill it out and return it?
And mail it back.
So if you were away on vacation,
you're not getting it.
You wouldn't get a mail-in ballot anyways.
Yeah, okay.
You wouldn't.
Yeah.
That does decrease the voter turnout in that the time limits
is still short.
Are quite short for
Okay.
people to turn around that ballot and get it back to me by my deadline, and I cannot accept a ballot that comes over that deadline, obviously.
Yeah, I didn't understand
So
that.
the increase in voter turnout for a mail-in ballot is
really
it really depends on the person. It's really hard for me to say that, seeing as we've never done it. But I'd say that the cost is more for the advanced voting day. So of the two, which is more expensive? Advanced voting day, but only because of staff time and the lengthy hours for each staff person to be there.
Councilor Matthew.
Well, I'd be in favour of a mail ballot just to give the opportunity for non-residents to vote. And for people on vacation, I think if they really wanted to vote, they'd find a way of getting that ballot sent to them.
Yeah.
Most people that go on vacation get someone to pick up the mail and things like that. So, I mean, some people wouldn't be bothered, but there are some people that would really like to vote, and they'll say, send me that ballot. So,
I just think. You done?
yeah, I'm done. As I was interrupted.
I apologize.
Cut off in mid-stop, flow.
I apologize, Councillor.
Coitus interruptus.
All right. Pardon me?
Pardon me?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know what you just
I
said.
said coitus interruptus.
That's what I thought you said. I've lost my train of thought.
I know,
Thank
feeling.
you. Okay, we'll come back to that. Is there any other comment on a preference around adding an advanced voting day or having a mail-in ballot?
I think it's
Any
been
thoughts?
consistent in our, as to increase voter turnout,
Right.
and you're presenting some possibilities for us, and I think an additional voting day, I know the costs are significant, but I do think will increase voter turnout, just that ability to have access. I don't know about the mail-in portion of that and the significance of that in terms of turnout, potential turnout. I just don't have enough information around, because I don't really know. And if we're catering to a non-resident population specifically, I am very in favor of an additional advanced voting day. I can see that it would have benefits. So that's my comment on that. But I think, as generally in the conversations we've been having, it's certainly increasing voter turnout, as we all know is important. At UBCM, decreasing the age of voting, we've all moved in that direction. I just don't know enough.
Myself, I'm definitely in favor of mail-in ballot, considering that. I'm not totally convinced about the benefit of another advanced polling day versus the cost. But what I might suggest is that we direct staff to make those amendments. You're going to come back with a bylaw and another report. And at that time, I think Elise can give us a little bit more information on roughly estimating the cost of that and reminding us of what the cost of the elections are. And that'll help us make a decision at that time. There's no final decision being made today. So we're asking for the amendments to come forward. I don't think asking for one is, asking for two amendments is not, that much more burdensome than asking for one, so. Yes.
I'd just like to mention that this year's federal election was the first time they allowed mail-in ballots for non-resident Canadians, which was a big plus. And I think if we don't start doing mail-in ballots, we're just falling behind the times.
I agree. I think things are going that way.
Yeah.
One day there'll be internet voting, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Remember what you were going to say? I think it was
I do actually. When we are asking for a provincial voters list, does that mean that that will be at the ballot station on the next voting day? Or the next election?
Yes, it would be.
So
Yeah, we have to-
you would then have the opportunity to not bring ID for the next voting day?
With the provincial voters list, I believe you still have to show ID. Yeah, it's only, I think, and I'll double check this when I come back to you.
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Can you flip back to the previous slide? Thanks. Okay, so I think we're looking at directing staff to amend the District of Tofino Election Procedures Bylaw number 1204/2014 to allow for use of the provincial voters list and to allow for an additional advanced voting opportunity and to allow for mail-in ballots. Are you making that motion?
Oh, is that, you're going to do the advanced voting day? A second?
Yeah, so let's just talk this through. What I'm suggesting is we direct staff to bring that forward to us. It's not a final decision today. In fact, it'll take 2 more meetings to do this. And that in the report, at least brings back next time with first, second, and third reading, she can lay it out so that we see the implications of each of the 3 moves. And if we, at that point, it'll be quite clear, I think, to amend the amendment, to change the resolution so that we're actually amending first reading with removing one of those things. If we make that.
That's right.
Yes. Okay.
Can we have an estimate of cost when they bring it back to us?
That's exactly what I'm asking for, yeah. Okay, so Councillor Chalmers is making that motion that I just read out loud. Is it clear to everybody what the motion is? Okay, is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McMaster. Any final discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. Thank you.
If council has questions about the AAP process or how that electoral area.
Yeah, I just got a question. In that letter we had, it refers to the fact if the ACRD, it's only for non-residents, 1 vote per household. Is that correct?
It's 1 vote for property, just like in a general election.
Yeah.
It's the same.
That's right.
No, if Robin and I can vote.
Yeah, as residents.
Yes, as residents.
Non-resident property owners, 1 vote per property.
That's correct. So it's the exact same as Mayor Osborne said. For non-resident electors who vote in, say, District of Tofino elections or the ACRD, if there's a multitude of owners, 1 person amongst those owners is elected to be the voter for that property. Only 1 non-resident property elector can vote per property, but it does get interesting when there are residents on site and those people also get votes. So it seems confusing, but really it's just 1 vote per non-resident property elector per property, and then everyone who lives in the area gets a vote as a resident. I'm not sure if I explained that well, but
I can help because I own a property with both of my parents
Yes,
who live
I
in
remember
Limo,
this.
and just one of my parents could come up and vote for the election that I ran in. So I got to vote, and my dad got to vote.
As a non-resident.
As a non-resident property, but only one of them could do it. So 2 of us got to vote on a 3-person.
I'm not sure it's fair.
I think it could be argued in many ways,
Yeah.
and it's a matter of perspective. So presumably, the government enables that because people who own property in a jurisdiction they don't live in are paying taxes, and so they have a voice, they get a say. But they don't get the same say if there's multiple owners of a property. You know, they had to draw the line somewhere, presumably. Yeah. Councillor Law?
I was going to say, because if you had, say, 10 property owners who didn't live in Tofino but they owned a property, it potentially could have a large effect on the outcome of an election, especially if you had like 100 owners, just per chance, right? So it is a way of protecting democracy, allowing people their voice, but not allowing, you know,
it to usurp the residents.
Yeah.
You could talk to Justin Trudeau or something.
Be knocking my head against a brick wall.
All right. Thank you very much, Elise. All right, then we have the 2020 meeting and acting mayor schedules. And though I know Elise did her best to put together what she hoped would be relatively simple, in speaking with Councillor Steer, there is a little bit of a complication. So
once again,
it's all right. Don't worry. That's why we do it this way, is to talk it through. So it initially had been changed up. So right now we're doing the first meeting of the month at 10 and the second meeting of the month at 4:30. But then what we realized is happening is that often when we have a stat holiday, the council meeting falls the day after at 10 a.m. and it just reduces the opportunity for members of council to talk to staff if you have questions. So Elise and I had this brainchild of like, hey, let's flip it around. But
and so, and then, I mean, I'll give you a quick, is that what happened was with the flipping that it put me unable to attend almost 70% or 50, at least 50%, if not more, of the meetings because I would actually...
Because your schedule.
Because of my schedule. And
that's fine.
And so that was the, but then we had the discussion further about the reduced opportunity to access staff, and then I think at least, you know, so there is ways to reduce that or increase that availability or in lieu of that. So.
Speaking with our CAO about that, we do have district cell phones and we are available to councillors outside of business hours if you need support with the council package. So when one of us has a report on the council package, we can try and make ourselves more available on those long weekend days, or try and mitigate this situation a little bit more by making ourselves more available.
Does Tuesday have to be a council day? Could we do it on Wednesdays?
No, it doesn't have to be a council day.
Tuesday works great for me because of the crew change day,
okay.
But it's just when we flip the hours and the times it ended up, I'm actually working right in the middle of all this. I know it's
No, it's about trying to do the best that we can for everybody in the schedules they have. And if we, I know you've got a motion that will help us with this, but if we just keep it the way it is right now, 10 a.m. and 4:30 p.m., we're going to survive. It's going to be fine. I appreciate the offer that what you're saying is maybe managers are a little more accessible on the weekend than we thought. I'm not in love with that. I mean, I really respect a person's ability to work within a certain set of hours. I would just say to council, again, and we've heard this before, do your best to review the package as early as possible so that on the Friday you have the opportunity to talk to our staff. I just don't personally want to abuse the offer. Thank you, though.
I agree with Mayor Osborne. I wouldn't feel comfortable calling unless it was really, really important. But what about maybe even releasing some of the council package for just specifically for those days that there is a holiday, like a day or so early, if there's something that is ready, with the idea that we will know like the package coming out, but just so we could have some advance reading or.
Yep. The bylaw states that we must get it out. I think we say 5 days before. 5 days before the meeting, but it's really just a crunch of time and our schedule and how we do that. So I think it would take a little bit of talk between us as a management team about our timelines, especially for the report review stage, which is actually quite tight. But it's not to say that it can't be done and we can work towards it. I don't want to overcommit now, but it's something we can talk about.
And I'm even just thinking just for the 3 where there is a holiday.
That's right, there is only 3, but yes,
Yeah.
I think it's
Those
a good
were-
point that we can.
And I think for me personally, for the Remembrance Day one, it kind of caught me. I hadn't really thought through the fact that it was a holiday until it was the weekend. I was like, oh, I can't talk to anybody on Monday. So being aware, like kind of highlighting to myself which ones were holidays, I think will help because I'll know to be like, okay, I really have to plan Thursday night to do my reading.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that there only being 3 on here, that the onus on the councillors to read their package immediately is not one 3 times a year that's above and beyond. And I mean, if that means coalescing as a group and being like, we have discussions and not taking so much of staff's time on Friday and meeting together, more than one councillor with a staff member, I think that we can probably organize ourselves to do that. Okay, I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, and I know we've also appreciated it in the past when we knew that a very large report was coming. That is sent to us in advance.
Yeah.
So things like the asset management investment plan, stuff like that, you know, to really dig through it in advance. It's always appreciated. And having newer people who are less used to some of the topics that we've been talking to, it's been really important. And it will for you too. Okay, so would you like to read your motion?
Well, at least
Please.
motion, but that the 2020 regular council and committee of the whole meeting schedule is attached as Appendix 1 to the report titled 2020 Meeting and Acting Mayor Schedule, dated November 26, 2019, be amended so that the first regular council meeting of each month begins at 10 a.m. and the second begins at 4:30 p.m. and be adopted as amended.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded. So everybody's clear? This just means we're staying with the status quo. All right, all in favor? Thank you. And opposed? Motion carried. And then the acting mayor schedule is there in reverse alphabetical order. I noticed. That's great. Did anybody have any questions about that? Were there any conflicts that you noted right now when you know that you will be away in a month and that it wouldn't work? We can change that in the middle of the year, but it's better to feel pretty certain about it right now. Yes.
I do have a question. If I am to go to LGLA and I'm the acting mayor,
It's okay because the mayor's there too. And, oh, I see what you're saying. So something happens
if
here.
both mayors are acting mayors,
Then whoever is here, if an emergency occurred, for example, the members of council who are here would convene and appoint somebody to be the, yeah, so you're.
I can still go.
You can still go.
Action.
Yes.
I only looked at the January, of course. But
Councillor Steve.
I knew I was first up at bat, but I won't be here for July, for a big chunk of July. But I think we.
We've only got, I think, 1 meeting in July, but that's not to say that other things could happen. that
That is correct.
Yeah.
I swapped you for August.
So Councillor McQuaid and Councillor Steer could just swap.
Oh, we horse trading?
Yep, horse trading.
Cards.
In which case, we would move that councillors be designated to serve as acting mayor in 2020 in accordance. Oh no, hang on, let's figure this the way, can I just cheat sheet?
Or I could just leave it there and.
Okay, so that, yeah, councillors be designated to serve as acting mayor in 2020. No, back up, stop. That the 2020 meeting and acting mayor schedules dated November 26, 2019, as attached to Appendix 2 of this report, be amended so that Councillor McQuaid serves as acting mayor in July and Councillor Steer in August, and be adopted as amended. Come on, give me a high five.
Oh, I give you a little shock there.
You did a job.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody okay with that? All right, did somebody second it? Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thomas. All in favor? Thank you, motion carried. Okay, and then we have the Tofino Rec Commission minutes from the meeting held the 16th of October for receipt.
Receipt?
Thanks, moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? You were there, Councillor Steer, any comments you wanted to make about your meeting?
No, I think it'll be coming forward, I think, at a later date with our Director of Community Sustainability. So there's stuff in the making, but I'll hold off.
Okay.
Any reasons for why Alex resigned?
Well, I can only speak to what his letter and conversations was, that at this time he didn't think he could commit the time family commitments and energy to move in that position. So that's the extent of what we have. And he had served a time on there, and he was thinking there was maybe a transition needed.
Okay. All right, all in favor of receipt? Thank you. None opposed? Motion carried. Motion to adjourn. Thank you. Moved, seconded. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carried. So can you guys stick around just for a second? We'll talk about the. Can you two stay here for just a second, and we'll just switch out the community hall and make sure we're all good.